welcome listeners to the Stories Fables Ghostly Tales podcast. And I'm your host, the Tale Teller. And today, I have an absolute special episode by Kyle Brant, a detective and investigative story titled One Drop at a Time. Two detectives, Detective Brant and Detective Underwood, encounter a murder with mysterious graffiti surrounding it that leads them onto an adventure like no other. I'm doing my absolute best not to give you any spoilers, you lovely people, and trust me, this is one story worth sticking through. I'm going to release this in 2 or 3 parts due to the sheer size of it, and rest assured, you'll get your detective fix with the remaining parts of this story coming out daily till completion. Also, Kyle is very active on both my YouTube and SoundCloud platform, so if you have any feedback, write it there. He'll see it and normally comment. He is awesome like that. And if you're a new listener, welcome to the show. And if you're a returning subscriber, high five, buddies. And I hope you have some kind of hot beverage with you. Now, turn those lights off, the sound up, and get ready for darkness and mystery. One Drop at a Time by Kyle Brant and Trevor Underwood. Case 1. Graffiti. Police tape quarantined a narrow alleyway next to an Asian food market. 2 decently fit men approaching the line with confidence. Both men raised a leather wallet, unfolding them to reveal their identification, and passing through before even hearing the postcard's response. "Thank you for coming, Detective Underwood, Detective Brant." An officer greeted the men, walking towards them with a pad in hand. Both men nodded when suddenly a brisk movement caught their eyes from the side. "You find who did this?" An elder Asian woman angrily cried out. "You're supposed to be good cop." Seeing this was clearly directed to Brant, the detective stepped aside to meet the woman at the line, adjusting his glasses before stopping. "Masako, at least let me find out the details here, before contaminating the scene," he replied, stopping her from passing the tape. "Let me gather my bearings, I promise. I will speak with you if something comes up." Underwood smirked after seeing the shopkeeper finally starting to calm down. Walking ahead of the officer taking forensic photos, tapping the officer's shoulder that was standing by the body. The detective took the scene, almost breathing in the details, while the officer tried to explain the details. However, those words were wasted upon Underwood, too focused on the case at hand. Brant came to a stop next to his partner after gathering all he could from Masako. "Well played. According to..." He cut himself off, however, following Underwood's eyes to a faint detail barely noticeable to the naked eye. "What is..." "More graffiti," Underwood interjected. "Refill, by the looks of it. Just like on the wall a few days ago. This time, with a corpse." Brant chuckled nervously after seeing the awkward expressions this statement caused amongst the forensic crew. "Victim? Underwood? The victim?" "Whatever makes the paperwork easier to read, I suppose." Brant smiled, though noticed that his partner began to rub the bridge of his nose, turning slightly to the side. If this is correlating to the graffiti case, why move to murder? That hasn't been the MO. A victim and some paint doesn't mean they are the killer. Brant rubbed his chin. Perhaps someone passing by the scene could have seen the opportunity to really spread their tag. And nothing catches attention like a murder investigation. "Yes, and if they did by chance pass by, would most like have..." "Right, I will start looking at the building nearby. Headache?" Underwood looked at his partner. "Yeah, I suppose. Just had one too many last night." "You having one too many? Now I know this is serious." Brant replied with sarcasm as he made his way around the corner of the building. Coming across a break in the bricks that lined the walls, he noticed a spot upon the pavement. Lowering his body, he realized what was first thought to be blood was actually a spot of paint, just as red. Calling over one of the first responders, once seeing the painted wall a few feet further, he awaited him, staring at the graffiti. "Yes, sir?" Brant shook his head, breaking his concentration from the new evidence. "What exactly was called in? Specifically?" The officer fumbled, grabbing for his recorded notes. At 0407 hours, a call was received by dispatch, apparently a call for some kind of figure vandalizing the corner of 9th and Winston Avenue. Arriving on scene, we found the body. Brant nodded. "So the call was vandalism, but instead we came across a homicide?" "Homicide?" The detective looked over the man. "Well, he didn't kill himself, obviously, Officer Nelson." The officer stepped back, realizing his own mistake. Of course." "Have Underwood here once he is done with the body, please," Brant requested, looking back to the vandalized wall. But before the officer could even acknowledge the order, a voice rang out. "Present and accounted for." Underwood moved and passed the baffled officer to meet the detective at the front of the painting, nodding at the wall without giving any notice to Brant, something he was accustomed to. "Figured it out?" Brant shook his head. "The patterns are obviously like the perps, but this time, something is different. Off, almost. What is your take?" he asked. After all, Underwood was more experienced, being the leading senior in the department. "Blood." Brant had a look of shock. "Blood? Blood red, detective." Underwood interrupted. "Red is the new color in the perp scheme. Most likely why it seems different to you." The detective took another look at the graffiti, looking down as the realization hit him. "Stop that. The fact you realize something was different means you have an eye for this. It is subtle. Many wouldn't. Still," Brant added, "I feel like it was luck." "Nonsense," Underwood added. "Now finish this up. I'm going to tend to the meat wagon for the body. See where it leads." "Roger that." "I wonder what the rest of the day is going to hold, after such a bang-up start," Underwood said, while he walked away. "Reports," Brant replied, hearing the slight chuckle from his departing partner. Case 2. Suicide. Arriving at the precinct, the two detectives walked to their respected office. Due to cutbacks, the department made some adjustments, one being that the homicide unit had to share an office with their partners. Not a crazy stretch, to be honest. As Detective Underwood would say, their real office was the streets, and that was shared by everyone after all. "Should we order in for lunch, you think?" Underwood looked up from his desk. "It's 8:15 in the morning." Brant shrugged. "Never too early to plan. Plus, it's not like you slept, so..." The detective was about to answer when the phone began to ring, instead holding up a finger as he answered the call. "Detective Underwood?" "Yeah. Yes. Yes. Is that so? Brant was pulling up his email, trying to keep busy, but he could not distract himself from the ongoing conversation. "Yeah, Brant," the detective said, looking dead at his partner, who tried looking as if he had just noticed. "Yep, we have a case," Underwood responded dryly. Brant stood up, grabbing his coat. "What do we got? Murder?" Underwood paused for a moment. "Of sorts, yes. Suicide." Taking a moment to process the information, Brant hesitated. Detective Underwood obviously regretting the blunt explanation. "When you are ready," he said, leaving the office. Brant drove the two down to the crime scene, met by the familiar yellow tape outside the hotel room they have seen hundreds of times. After the generic greetings, the men entered the crime scene to see a white female hanging from the ceiling fan by a computer cord. Still in her nightwear, Underwood took a glance of the scene, rubbing his eyes again, which did not go amiss by Detective Brant. "What do you make of this, Brant?" The detective looked around what was seemingly an open and shut case. "Well, there is no indication of struggle, most likely stepping off the bed to hang." Trailing off, he found a single drop of blood by the bed frame, next to a single syringe. Looking closely at the body, he found several track marks hidden beneath makeup, from the web of her fingers to the nook of her elbow. And a heroin addict, most likely succumbed to depression. "A valid possibility," Underwood said, touching his temple. Brant sighed. "Do you need some water or something? I know you still have a headache." The detective waved it off. "I'm fine. You, go to the front desk and find out how she paid for the room, please. Possibly any guests she may have had." "Yes, sir," the officer addressed said, before heading out of the room. Detective Underwood sat in a saloon chair in the corner, facing the body, his hands crossed with both index fingers extended above his lips. "Brant, why did you think she used heroin?" Brant seemed a little baffled by the seeming obvious question. Well, the track marks were a dead giveaway. I mean, right there down to her fingers." "What is the point of sticking yourself between the fingers, though? It can't be comfortable." Again, Brant felt a bit lost. "To hide the track marks, mostly. I have seen people even do so between their toes before." "Yes, but what is the point if you're just going to be sticking your arm as well? Kind of defeats the purpose, don't you think?" Detective Brant looked back at the body, his mind slowly gathering the pieces, suddenly becoming clearer to him. "For that matter, you spent some time DEA, right, Brant? What is the normal practice when shooting up?" Besides getting it in as fast as possible, I would say prepping the vein. Puncture clean by pulling a bit of blood up before shooting it for a quick flush, and pass out." "I had the information you requested, sir," the officer said, entering the room with his notepad in hand. The detective gave him a quick nod to continue. Yes, well, according to the desk manager, she paid for 5 days in advance, and yesterday he found an envelope with cash and a note extending her stay by 3 more days." "Is that it?" The officer glanced over his notes quickly. Besides finding her today, when the room service came by, yeah, that was pretty much it. Brant looked from the officer over to Underwood. He was still somber, but he knew that his partner was deep in thought. After all the years they have known each other, he had learned well the practices his partner kept. Sometimes the focus was daunting, even obsessive, though Brant couldn't say much. After all, they were partners for a reason. Funny how she went so long without being noticed. It isn't that uncommon though. I mean, people are found dead all the time in hotels, and she did pay in advance, Underwood, Brant mused. Underwood looked up from the scene, rising from the seat with his response. "Maybe. Though wouldn't you want to be found sooner rather than later if you planned on killing yourself?" Detective Brant thought for a moment. "Generally, unless maybe she was taking this time to think. You know, psych herself up." "Exactly," Underwood continued. "And if that is even the case, don't you find it odd? She paid in advance, obviously planning to be here for a while, yet where is everything? There is no luggage, no purse or wallet, even the credit card is missing." Brant's eyes widened slightly, the pieces beginning to come together now. Possibly, she did not think she would need to pack, knowing the outcome? The detective smirked slightly. "I appreciate you are finally looking at every angle, but what about the computer? I doubt that the desk manager would forget an attractive woman walking in with nothing but a nightgown and a computer cable in tow." He then walked over to the body, still hanging there, as still as any picture could be. "Not to mention, poor girl's been dead for some time. Why waste the money to extend the stay when she already was checked out?" Brant met him at his side, his mind processing all the details. Murder. Again. The detective looked over at him, noting the slight relief in his eyes. It made sense, knowing how difficult the thought of suicide was for his partner. Indeed, though you already knew that, Underwood said, walking towards the door. Wait, what? Brant asked, a bit surprised. How is that? The syringe, of course, Underwood answered, stopping at the exit. You said it yourself, Brant. The process of injecting, the extensive track marks, you just did not allow your mind to deduce it yet. The perfect drop of blood by the syringe point. Feel free to test it, but it's not hers. Brant's mind felt numb, racing back and practically envisioning the needle punching through the skin, drawing back just enough before the red danced in the syringe only to be pulled from whence it came. Efficient. Clean. The blood was left on purpose, he whispered. Finish up with those pictures and cut the girl down, Underwood said, turning to walk away, making a quick gesture towards Brant. Go ahead and walk the grounds. Check in for any potential witnesses. You won't be staying? Underwood waved it off. I've seen enough. Besides, I have something to attend to myself. I will meet up with you later. Brant nodded as he watched his partner leave, taking one more long look over the room before resting his gaze on the woman. Well, let's put rubber to ground. After a few hours of roaming the hotel for any possible leads, Brant found himself back in the room of the murder. The forensic team was just about finished removing the body when he noticed Detective Underwood stroll past the team. Any luck? Brant shook his head. Nada. Nobody saw anything. In fact, the closest thing we got all day was, and I quote, I don't know nothing about nobody or dead folk. Insightful, Underwood replied, watching Brant put away his notepad. What did forensic grab? Just as much, really. The blood came back unidentified. It was tainted with ammonia of some degree. Brant watched the detective's eyes narrow. Doubt we'll find any prints either. Best we ride this one out. See what the tox screen comes back with on the body. Hopefully they can get an ID on her as well. Brant added. She hasn't been identified yet. No. Looking back, that may be a good reason why the perp took her identification, stalled the process. It also confirms she doesn't have a record, at least big enough to trigger any lead yet. Brant scratched his temple. It gets me still, how people can destroy innocent lives like this with no regard. I said she didn't have a record, Brant, Underwood replied, not that she was innocent. All things will pan out in due time. Detective Brant nodded. Perhaps. You good? The detective asked, noticing the distinct look in his partner's eyes. Yeah, just thinking. Need a ride home? If you don't mind. Not at all. Let's go. I think they have the place pretty much wrapped up. Not too long after Brant was pulling up to the apartments where his partner stayed, pulling to the side, allowing him out of the car. Hey, don't forget to water down the whiskey tonight, eh, Underwood? Brant chuckled, with an exaggerated laugh he made with his contorted face, taking off for his own home not that much farther away. Entering the apartment, Brant tossed his keys into the bowl on the stand by the door, making his way to the kitchen where he grabbed the bottle of water and leaned against the counter, still in thought. Absent-mindedly, he began clearing the stovetop, preparing some finely cut chicken that he quickly began to saute with some vegetables in a homemade teriyaki sauce. Brant enjoyed cooking, not just for the obvious benefits it had, or the satisfaction it brought others he cooked for, but the quiet it brought to his mind. Something he learned about himself after having to see that counselor years back after the shooting. In a sense, it was his meditation, though even tonight something seemed to weigh on his mind. The woman seemed oddly familiar to him, though for the life of him he could not remember ever seeing her face before. After completing his meal and washing the dish he had used, Brant ran through his nightly routine of stretches and exercises before laying himself down for the night, deciding that it would be best to get some rest and start fresh tomorrow, especially after how groggy the last week had left him. Case 3. Burglary. A couple days had passed with little to no action. A pleasant and rare reprieve for Detective Brant as he made his way home. The talk screens had come back clean, if you could call them that, outside the heroin that is, and still no ID was made. It seemed this was going to be another statistic for the cold case files. However, it was late and Brant was feeling the weight of the day on his shoulders, deciding to lumber himself to bed where he passed out almost the exact moment his head hit the pillow. The dream was short-lived, unfortunately, as a blaring tone brought Brant back to reality only a couple of hours later. Lifting up the phone, he glimpsed through the screen's light, looking at the caller ID before answering. Work? Huh. Nah, I'm up, no worries. Just tell me where. Okay. We'll be there soon. Not too long after, Brant arrived on scene where he found a couple of squad cars sitting outside a jewelry store with their lights silently flashing. Detective Underwood alongside them. They caught you sleeping, huh? Brant stifled a yawn. Nah, I'm good. What do we have? Looks like a break-in. What in the world is that mess? Underwood asked, pointing to the detective's hand he held over his mouth. Brant looked down and realized he had some smeared bluish residue on the blade of his left palm. I don't know, he said while inspecting it. Must have come across some wet paint or something? Anyway, let's get on with it. Underwood then taking the lead into the shop. Stopping at the door, they looked around at the broken glass, Underwood sidestepping the shards while looking keenly at the patterns. Interesting. Looking at this, it looks like the window was spring-punched, not shattered, and the trespasser took care not to disturb the glass. The lines along the pane definitely fit the setup, Brant added. Let's get some light in here. One of the assisting officers had some high-filtered beams illuminating the scene. The first and most noticeable details being the streaks of red throughout the entire store. What the? Brant said, roaming over the area and seeing the broken glass cases as well as the upturned cash register. Detective Underwood whistled. Bet you never thought this place would ever look like this, huh? Before Brant could ask him what he meant, the owner arrived in a huff, demanding to speak with the detectives. I got him, Brant offered, moving out to meet the short and angry gentleman. What in the hell happened here? The man exclaimed. We are discovering that ourselves, sir, Brant replied, holding up his hand to calm the man down. Can I get your name, sir? Cade. George Cade, he said, pushing past to enter the store. And I want to see what happened. Brant luckily had the quick sense to grab the man and lift him over the glass remains as to preserve the scene. Sir, we are looking into it, but you have to remain cautious. This is a crime scene. Slightly embarrassed, the man huffed. Well, yes, of course it is. I was robbed. Actually, Detective Underwood interjected while staring at the broken case housing all the wedding band sets. If you could help us identify what, if anything, is missing, that would be a tremendous help. Brant walked with Mr. Cade as he shifted his eyes through the inventory, the man shaking his head. I cannot see anything missing. It all seems to be here. So, this individual decides to break into a jewelry store, tag and bust the place up and not even take anything? Was there anything missing from the teller? Brant inquired. No, it was empty. Mr. Cade, is there any chance we could pull the security footage for the last few hours? From what? These cameras? He asked sarcastically, pointing to the mounted security. They are fake. all made to intimidate would-be thieves. And I guess it worked. You installed fake cameras to intimidate crooks, Brant repeated dryly. Well, it's not like I live in the slums, the man defended himself. Brant sighed. Of course, sir. Do you know of any possible enemies or individuals that may have a grudge against you? Possibly wanting to send a message? Detective, Underwood interrupted. I believe someone was trying to leave a message. Both men stopped and glanced over at the detective. Mr. Cade, this would not happen to be your laptop, would it? No. Why? Underwood signaled to Brant, drawing his attention to a small but undeniable spot of blood on the case of the computer. But why? Why break in and just leave evidence at another scene? It doesn't make sense. Unless, Underwood said, as if realizing something, they were trying to tell us who they were. Underwood pulled Brant down to his level, where suddenly he saw all the red streaks of paint become a line through the store at the new perspective, all of them creating the same familiar word, refill. And this concludes part 1 of One Drop at a Time by Kyle Brant and Trevor Underwood. What a fantastic story! Nothing like a good mystery, right? The next part will be coming out tomorrow and it's a big one, so we'll have a lot to get through. Do any of you lovely listeners have an idea of what could be going on? Or are you some kind of investigative genius and have already figured something out? If you think you know, let me know via email. And if you have stories of your own to send in, go for it. I've been getting more and more stories sent in every week and from listeners. This blows me away. So feel free to email me here, StoriesFablesGhostlyTales@gmail.com. And one more thing. If you have any time to help out, all I'm looking for is that you let your friends and family know that this podcast exists. One of the best ways to do this is just simply showing people how to listen to and download podcasts. Not only will it help me, but it will help other podcasters and your family and friends to have unlimited entertainment for free. And yes, it is that time. This is the place where stories live, and you tale-tellers come to listen. Enjoy your day or night, and join me every weekday for our creepy tradition. And as always, till next time.